Well, let's turn back now to the Mar-a-Lago raid affidavit, with 20 of the 38 pages being notably or fully redacted. Here to weigh in, Stephen Miller, former White House senior policy advisor and founder of America First Legal. Stephen, your reaction to this affidavit, which you really can't even read because most of it's blacked out.
Well, it's true that most of the affidavit is redacted and that this is a continuing cover-up on the part of the Biden Justice Department. But I will tell you that what you can read is positively horrifying. At the beginning of the affidavit, there's this breathtaking paragraph that basically says, and I'm paraphrasing here, that the National Archives requested from President Trump boxes that were in his possession, and the president politely, voluntarily, as a gesture of goodwill, shared those boxes. And then the National Archives, not liking what's in the boxes, then sent a letter to the FBI saying, we demand an investigation. And the FBI then, receiving that letter, immediately opens an investigation. Now, just to take a pause there, you are talking about bureaucrats at the National Archives imagining that they have the right to question the judgment of the President of the United States. When Donald Trump left the White House, he had absolute authority to make every and any and all decisions on matters of national defense, national security, and classification. When you leave, you can then have bureaucrats at the National Archives or bureaucrats at the Department of Justice trying to criminalize any decisions that you may or may not have made as President of the United States in your capacity as President of the United States. To do that is to live in a country in which we are ruled by bureaucrats and not by the voters. It is, in a very real sense, a forward attack on our whole constitutional system of government. I was shocked to read that.
That's a very interesting point. It feels that way. The president says he's not involved, he doesn't know anything. Seems to be sort of walking that back now with the press secretary a little bit. How much do you think he really knew when this all shakes out, Stephen?
Well, that's something that if, God willing, the House Republicans move from the minority to the majority next year, they're going to have to investigate. They're going to have to issue subpoenas. They're going to have to depose people, up to and including the current president of the United States, Joe Biden. But what has been revealed in the last week is that the White House counsel's office, which of course reports directly to, you guessed it, President Biden, played an integral role in establishing this entire setup, this entire frame job. I mean, again, for those who may not be familiar with the National Archives or the working of the Justice Department, it may not be readily apparent how truly insane it is for some functionary at the archives, some person who fills boxes for a living, to say, well, I don't like the judgment that President Trump made, or that people in the White House made, or people in the administration made about packing, so I'm going to ask for a criminal investigation? You have no right to do so. You have no basis to do so. You have no constitutional authority whatsoever to second-guess a president. Under that theory, a president could be elected in the future, could make a decision about national security that the archives doesn't like, or that some bureaucrat in the federal agency doesn't like, and they could just open a criminal investigation right then and there. The notion that these statutes apply to a president is preposterous. They apply to subordinate officers of the government. So put aside the question that I am quite certain that all of the assertions that have been made are false and that all the factual allegations that have been made are fabricated. Put that aside. The president cannot possibly be in violation of any of these statutes. To do so is a logical paradox.
And it ends, all of that, and fascinating, all of that ends in an FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago. And I want to stick, Stephen, with the FBI for a second, because Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg had some really alarming things to say today. Listen to this.
Basically, the background here is the FBI, I think, basically came to us, some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, like, you should be on high alert. There was we thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that. So just be vigilant.
be vigilant, which turns out that meant like algorithmic changes to shadow ban. That's pretty shocking stuff. Surprising to you, though?
Not surprising, but quite hideous and alarming. You are talking about Banana Republic type behavior here. Again, you have lifetime appointed career federal employees who have no accountability. They do not answer to voters in any way, shape, or form, deciding what information voters can access before an election. Never mind the fact that, far from being Russian disinformation, that the contents of the Hunter Biden laptop have been repeatedly verified over and over and over again. Plus, I don't think you need to have training as an intelligence officer to watch a video of Hunter Biden being Hunter Biden and committing Hunter Biden offenses to know that it's Hunter Biden. I mean, on what basis could any so-called intelligence officer look at a video of Hunter Biden committing a crime and say, oh, that's Russian disinformation? It's on video, for crying out loud. I mean, the brazenness of it is just so breathtaking. And let's not pretend that Facebook put up some big resistance to this.
No.
Facebook happily, eagerly acquiesced to the demands of the security state to interfere directly in our elections.
You could share it. It just didn't show up for anybody. That was basically Zuckerberg's answer to that question. We're out of time, Stephen Miller. Appreciate your insight. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.